Now in this second video about emotion, let's see how an emotion gets expressed. When a signal from inside or outside the body is decided to be an emotion, next step is to also make it an emotion. We mentioned this means both changing the facial expression, getting ready to act, alter autonomous functions, and also in most cases leading to a changed subjective mental feeling. This is communicated out from the primary emotional centers of the brain to the motor system and further out to the effector muscles via several channels. One important channel for this is the basal ganglia, also called the brain's interface between emotive and cognitive processes on the one hand and motor functions on the other. Increased activity in the limbic and paralimbic brain regions changes the balance in the corticostriato-thalamocortical pathways going through the basal ganglia and thereby the overall behavior. Two locations of particular interest are the nucleus accumbens, where many reward-related signals are passed on from the limbic system to the motor system, and the habenula, where many negative emotions, such as punishment, are linked to motor behavior. Other important interfaces between emotive brain regions and behavior can be found in the posterior cerebellum, which is the affective part of the cerebellum, the brainstem, more precisely regions such as the periaqueductal gray and the ascending reticular arousal system, and also in the hypothalamus, which is a meeting place for neural signals and regulatory systems for hormones, where neural information about emotions can affect the levels of different hormones, such as stress hormones, and thereby, in a wider sense, affect the state of many internal organs of the body.
What is often talked about, although lately challenged on scientific grounds, is that there is a set of human facial emotive reactions that are the same independently of which culture you belong to, the so-called basic affects. Some typical examples are joy, sadness, anger, disgust, and fear. If you express one of these feelings, it is highly likely that anyone from around the world would understand you, even if he or she talks a different language and doesn't share the same norms and values as you. A kind of Esperanto for the language of emotions. The facial muscles expressing emotions are governed by a few cranial nerves going out straight from the brain. And the activity of these cranial nerves depends on the activity in higher brain centers. Interestingly enough, there are somewhat different brain centers that are involved in the different basic emotions. The expressions of joy and sadness seem to be associated with an increased activity in the subgenual anterior cingulate cortex. Anger with an increased activity in the inferior frontal gyrus, and fear with increased activity in bilateral amygdala and the insular cortex.
As we mentioned earlier, an emotion is not only a feeling and a facial expression, it is also a propensity to act, to fight, flight, freeze, eat, seek shelter, burst out into laughter, make love, etc. These actions can easily be interpreted as evolutionary meaningful. They help the individual and the group to survive. Some emotions lead to an approaching behavior, for example rage reaction, where the person threatens or attacks. Others to avoidant reactions, such as the socially withdrawing reaction of sorrow. Strong emotions not only activate the respective limbic regions, they also decrease the activity prefrontally. Many limbic structures are connected to prefrontal cortex in a manner that the higher activity in the one region, the lower in the other. Given the important function of prefrontal cortex to be an inhibitor of bottom-up impulses, it is not hard to imagine how a strong reaction can lead you to act out behaviors when you're emotional, that otherwise you would have inhibited.
The conscious subjective feelings during an emotion reflect many of the processes that we have described in this video. The experience of a changed body situation, for example, you can feel your heart pounding faster, your face is blushing, or that you have tears running down your cheeks. It can also be an increased feeling of presence and increased attention. the content of the interpretations you make of the situation you are in that has evoked the emotion and associated memories. Reactions on what the emotion leads you to in terms of actions. You might reflect on whether you should act out your emotion or if it's better to inhibit the impulse.
To summarize, studying the neuroscience of emotions helps you to understand important aspects of what it means to be a human. It sheds light not only on the interplay between brain and mind and body, and how two individuals can relate to each other, but also how an abstract mental state can be explained in neurobiological terms. For psychiatrists, it is a useful tool in the interpretation of a patient's symptoms, and it helps you to understand and explain to a patient where in the process the therapy intervenes.